Thanks so much to Yanis and Helena for having me over. It's my first time in Cyprus, and it's been a really warm welcome, and it's been great to meet everyone and have the conversations kind of around the edge that aren't on the camera as much as the stuff that are on the camera. So it's been really interesting. And I'm going to speak about kind of this idea of a quantified community and how I get in projects that I do people to share different data sources with me, and then use kind of behavioural design techniques to interpret those in a way, or to use those the behavioural design techniques of kind of visibility and understanding for people to then work with those projects. And I think a couple of things struck me yesterday from what the speaker said. Kit and Mark both spoke a few different things that really resonated. Kit, and if I got this wrong, I was typing them down. Connecting abstract experiences through embodied experiences is something that I found a really succinct way of saying what I do. So sometimes I try to allow people to embody different experiences of surveillance, of conspiracy theories, of data sensors, of space, and allow people to understand that. So I might take that line and use it to explain to my mum what I do, because it's always a difficult kind of conversation. And then Mark had a couple of great lines, and again, I'm not quoting here, but those who are implied in the technology have a right to understand it. And that's very much something that I try and do, and use performative, playful ways of using the technologies for people to then just to understand it, to know that it's there, to know then in terms of that kind of behavioural design aspect, that once you're aware of it, once you know what it can do in a different way, you're then kind of able to understand and make your own decisions on that technology in a way that isn't always as dense as like reading a paper, or as scary as reading a Wired article. It's just more kind of performative pieces. And then you also said sometimes art is like a canary in the coal mine for things, and I think some of this work is definitely kind of canary-esque. So I started out, I studied design and 3D design, and I started out making kind of commercial projects. In Ireland at the time, it was like 2006, there was kind of a housing boom, and so I was rendering houses and making them, and I didn't realize at the time, but my commercial work was kind of always bootstrapping or feeding the artwork that I was doing. So even though these kind of skills were kind of whatever, they were paying the bills, at the same time I was using those to make kind of creative kind of animation work and things that were kind of around that. And I've kind of used that, and it's only like retrospectively when you look back you realize that sometimes commercial work is always kind of feeding what you're doing. And so in 2016 I went to work in California in a place called 72 and Sunny, which is a big agency in Playa del Rey, and I was living in Venice Beach, and it was very cool. And we're working on different projects, so it was kind of a thing where you worked one hand on creative projects and then other hand on client kind of commercial projects. And so these were the kind of cool offices that were Howard Hughes. Do you know Howard Hughes, the guy who had they were his old offices, and they'd moved into them, and there was like beer taps and hammocks and all that kind of startup things that trick you into doing an 80-hour week. And is it really an email if you're sending it on a couch? Yes, it is. So you kind of work there throughout the kind of summer. And one of the projects that I worked on was the Starbucks holiday campaign, which is really difficult to ideate ideas for Christmas, or they don't call it Christmas, they call it holidays, in July in Los Angeles. It's like trying to come up with Christmas ideas, very, very hard. And we kind of worked on this, and the red cup is a really big thing. They bring it out every year, and the year before they had brought out a blank cup and people had added their things. There's also a lot of social problems going on at the time. It's like Black Lives Matter, there was a lot of different things going on, and so we wanted this idea of sharing, an augmented sharing, that you could gift someone a piece. So it's like, Merry Christmas, here's a coffee, leave it, and it's like Pokemon Go, drop the coffee and move on sort of thing. And it was through this that I found out that they used a lot of data that they gathered from different people about locations. So they wanted to know where a new store was going to be, and they were buying third-party data from companies like Fitbit to say, well, actually there's a lot of traffic that goes through this neighborhood, and there's a lot of traffic that goes over here. And they were like, if we have an augmented sharing app, we can possibly locate it in high traffic volume places. And I was like, okay, I didn't think they were sharing that data. And they were like, no, it's really micro. And one of the things that was pointed out at the time was there was an earthquake. This is afterwards in San Francisco, Berkeley, and San Jose, and they could actually pinpoint from when people woke up when the earthquake was. This isn't the actual earthquake, this is people's sleep patterns. So they had quite minute kind of data on this, and I was like going like, okay, so this is like interesting, seeing kind of behind the mask a little bit of what's going on. And if Yanis just cuts that bit out, because I'm probably under NDA, that'd be great. But the Fitbit policy at the time was like, we'll never share your data. We'll only share personally identified data directly with us. But then there was a kind of an addendum to that, little bit of a thing. It was like, Fitbit may share or sell aggregated, de-identified data that does not identify you. And so that's what they were buying. But at the same time as this, governments were buying it. So governments were buying local area data to say, you know, there's a cycle route here, there's a thing here, a lot of traffic here, we need to have more services there. But then that was your taxes buying back your own data coming around. So this idea of, why are you paying for your own data when you could have, you know, a community kind of sharing piece? And spoke about, you know, the problems with sometimes, you know, sharing as a kind of citizen science part is difficult. And then what's even scarier, since Google bought Fitbit, is the last, if necessary, in connection with the sale or merger, bankruptcy, the sale of assets, reorganize your company, can be sold. So, you know, I know Google said that they weren't going to do anything with the data that they bought, but I don't think they were buying it for old technology on fitness trackers. They were just seeing how they could get more data with that. We also, while we were there, we got to kind of have our kind of canary in the coal mine kind of moment, where we put on an exhibition, and we were, you know, wanted to do something. They wanted to do something that was both the store and a piece. And so we had an exhibition that was desired, and it was all about the avocado, because the avocado was an immigrant to the place, but all this thing about immigration was happening, and it was a luxury even though it was cheap. And so we wanted to kind of reflect back society at it and how it was kind of fetishized. So we made these different kind of pieces on the avocado, and yeah, I have a short video on it that I can play here. We made like a 12 foot Americado, which is like giant American avocado. So hopefully the sound works on this.
Desired, a pop-up gallery space and concept retail store, examines the transformation of a common object into a status symbol. It's a comment on how our society can turn anything and everything into a celebrity. Through a series of interactive installations and art pieces, we explored the collective obsession of the avocado. City of Avocados presents 6 avocados curated from different locations around the city. This exhibition asks the question of how location relates to value. Americado is an absurdly large avocado, symbolizing the fruit's abnormal growth and popularity, while itself being a photo opportunity. Bondle is an interactive piece that plays with our senses of touch and sound, turning the familiar act of feeling an avocado for ripeness into an uncomfortable, sexualized experience. Part immersive theater, part pop-up shop, the Cado space plays with the conventions of luxury. The look and feel is deliberately minimal, a physicalization of how today just about anything with the right packaging and logo can be turned into a brand. Desired celebrates the absurdity of our fixation with the avocado, while exploring the ridges and grooves of our obsession. The 4-day pop-up art exhibit culminated with a party that spotlighted this superfruit's 15 minutes of fame.
So yeah, that was our kind of exhibition about all about the avocado and kind of, you know, being the canary in the coal mine. And so this, alongside kind of what I was doing academically, I'm a lecturer in a university in Ireland. I was writing like articles about behavioural design and dark patterns and how they're using these kind of behavioural design parts with it. and tried to kind of take that and marry it into the kind of projects that I was working on. So the avocado one didn't really use behavioral design, but I kind of think the confluence of these two things kind of spoke to the work that I produced kind of after that. So this is like 4 projects that I'll go through, and have videos and parts, but if we need to skip on, I can move quickly. That use the user community data and behavioral design in different ways, and so these are all since kind of 2020. And so Shelter in Place was the first one. It was collaboration with Peter Power, who's a visual and sound artist, and we wanted to kind of examine space, and it actually takes a lot of the same kind of tools that are used for these kind of mapping pieces to create it. So in 2020 we were kind of in these bubble spaces that we couldn't share with other people, and we wanted people to be able to kind of connect. We also had an idea of shelter in place was an American saying, but shelter in place are very different for different people. And I was teaching online at the time, and I was able to see into different people's worlds and how socioeconomically, you know, it was very different for some people, how some people had like big houses and they were in gardens and they're having a lovely time, and other people were sharing with a lot of other people and they couldn't get a room to themselves to take a lecture and things like that. So that kind of difference of space. But we had an open source app that we could kind of get the volumetric data of their rooms recorded, and it's since got sunset actually, which is kind of annoying. And then we put it onto an open source virtual reality site called Reach Love, and so people could move into people's space and kind of understand and empathize with people that they had their different kind of spaces that we all kind of lived in. So the kind of lived experience, and you know, people reacted to it really nicely. This is kind of some of the kind of capture moments that were in it. So it's kind of creating these volumetric pieces, and yeah, people are kind of nosy, so they kind of love nosing around other people's space and kind of going, what's that over there? And it's very lo-fi, and we had to really degrade it to get it to run on the web. But you know, it was really nice project, and people kind of responded to it and gave us their different spaces that they had. People spent some time in it, and we've developed it further since for larger kind of projection pieces, and working with kind of finer data with new headsets and things that would be more like this. And so we're going to do a kind of a like 2.0 of it this November. So I have a short video explaining it here.
As communities, we've become intimate with the experience of isolation during this pandemic. Our vulnerability has been confronting, and we've been doing so in majoritively small spaces, surrounded by our histories, our possessions, our experiences. This has distorted the passage of time and elevated our domestic space into a world of accidental personal monuments. During this time, we've all felt the need to reconnect, to escape our own stories and be present in the stories of others. I think this was on both our minds when we came across this software that allows you to map the three-dimensional space around you using a series of photographs and GPS coordinates. You can see here that it's creating a sort of dot matrix around objects in real time, and that allows you to make these spaces come to life in 3 dimensions. And what you're left with is a sort of memory of the objects.
And so the actual capture and creating of the point cloud, like the image texture map, here we see the rendered parts that it actually recreates and reconstructs this based on overlapping images and overlapping pixels. And that mapped onto the point cloud allows it to reconstruct the space. And it's not just for these indoor spaces, we can also look at outdoor spaces, buildings that, you know, we feel may not always be there, buildings that we pass every day. The natural light allows for the photogrammetry. We actually capture them and move around them in this way. It allows you to appreciate them in a different space.
Obviously, this technology can be used to capture entire areas or even cities, but we were more interested in the internal stories, the unseen spaces, the domestic, these places where we were living through this international catastrophe.
You know, capturing this space in this way was something that we've been working with for a while, doing volumetric capture, hacking different bits of hardware and software, but switching to this photogrammetry method really allowed us to make it accessible to anyone to capture their space just using their smartphone.
In order to help people emotionally connect to this digital realm, you use other immersive narrative devices such as surround sound or music, storytelling, level design, lighting design. Even the aesthetic of the world makes a huge difference in this. But we felt it was really important that any technology we used would be widely available and almost open source, so that the power to create these beautiful spaces wouldn't be just ours, but would be something that could be handed over to the audience itself. With this in mind, we want to collaborate with our audiences over the next year to create a digital monument to these hidden stories and inequalities that we've been experiencing during this time.
A lot of people talked about the quarantine as, you know, the virus not discriminating against anyone, but it very much did discriminate in terms of what place you were. If you had a place to yourself, if you had a place where you could work, be safe, shelter, not worry about who you were with.
What we can create is mutual spaces shared by one another that we can literally walk around inside. We can be with each other in new ways when old ways were not possible. We can see parts of ourselves that are unseen and create a genuine intimacy across a digital space that maybe has not existed before.
So yeah, we've been capturing kind of data since on people and kind of doing open calls for stories and for grammetry captures and things like that. And we're building a virtual space that's going to be an in-person event that you'll have a headset, there'll be performers, there'll be live projection and surround sound and things like that. So currently working on a new ideation of that. But it's been really powerful for people to be able to kind of, you know, have that access to capturing and creating space in a really interesting, open way. The barrier to entry has been really, really low, actually. You know, we've just been using like voice notes and videos, so like WhatsApping each other, which is just like, you know, if it's not the smartest way, but I'm saying if it works, it's the right technology to use. So moving on from that, again, I collaborated with Peter and Joe and Tom on a virtual reality work, a networked virtual reality part. Part of what we felt with it in it was that people didn't feel present in virtual worlds very much. It was kind of like methodologies that you would go through an experience that was linear and only had it. So what we did was we created a piece that would imply the audience member by first interviewing them in the real world, so they spoke to the actor, and then they would enter the virtual space with the actor. So some of what you spoke about in your earlier interview part was then incorporated into the performance, so making it more personal to you, giving you a sense of belonging and a sense of agency. So it was kind of like signing up for a social network that you gave your name, you gave certain data about yourself as you did it, and then the actors were able to incorporate that into the show, and it gave people a kind of a strange sense of being there. And it was kind of mixed, both audience being there and being out of it, and really it kind of like, it was a little bit about like, why do you go inside the headset was a big thing. It's like, are we using technology for technology's sake? Because that happens a lot. But what we wanted to do was create a safe space for conspiracy theorists. So kind of like a truth social virtual reality where you can say anything. But once you went in there, they kept saying more and more conspiracy theories until the time the audience wanted to get out. So they'd take off the headset and then they'd meet them again. And then at the end, like, they were pushed out an exit door. So they were kind of thrown out of the space. And the theatre festival very much wanted to have like an attendant outside to see if everyone was okay, but we're like, no, they have to appear on the street and there's no one around. dumped out. So this was the kind of performance space that we had. So it was very weird to build because we were all in headsets and kind of performing it, and we'd kind of, go through all these iterations and meet in the headset and talk about how we were going to build these different words and really what the audience experience was. And we're kind of bringing this back to the behavioural design thing of like the UX of it, what we want people to feel at different points within it. So bringing that kind of consumer point of view to it, to bear in the audience experience. And then we created these different characters this is kind of a Bauhausy kind of one, and it's kind of based on what the actors looked like a little bit. This was one of the conspiracy rooms that you're in, which are the dots that have the different things, and each of these is a sound point as well. So as you got closer to them, you'd hear weird conspiracy theories as you walked up to them, and you could kind of walk around. He's like, no, don't listen to that. Come over here, trying to get you to the actors. The actors were in virtual reality headsets at the same time, and they described it, they'd never done it before, so they described it like being a puppeteer, because they were trying to control these characters that I'd like designed and rigged, and so they found it kind of hard. And this was the main character who saw herself as the Queen of Ireland, Queen of conspiracy theory sort of things, and at a crossroads in her life. And the room was very strange. Then we had like 2 booths. That's Katrina, she's the main actor. The other booth will have Carl, he's the other actor, the guy who's bringing it through, and this is the audience member, so they kind of all experience that. So you'd meet them in real life and then go into this booth to kind of chat in the conspiracy sort of piece. And you can see Katrina's hands are kind of up all the time because she was able to grow and scale above people to, speak down to them and multiply and do all these different parts. And it's, kind of network performance. And Carol walking around, so you meet them in real life, then you hear their voices, so there's this kind of connection with it, and then they know all this information about you from your survey, so it comes into the data point. Again, I've got a short video that I can play, and then this is also networked as well. I should explain. So part of it was about network data and being able to do it. So when we took it over to South by Southwest last year, the actors stayed in Ireland. Except for Katrina, who's on holidays in the Canaries. She had to bring a headset with her to the Canaries, and the actors appeared at South by Southwest virtually, and now it's opening next week in Vancouver, where none of the team are going over, just everyone's going to network into it. So it's a type of green touring, like a less carbon kind of intensive kind of touring with the piece. So
come with me. So this one, I think to date, is probably the most challenging, just because of the newness of this area in technology. I mean, and because nobody else has done it, or very few other people have done it. So we are blazing a trail. So you can't look to, how did that company do it, or how did that company do it, or how's it worked before? Because we're kind of making this stuff up.
It's quiet, isn't it? And he's kind of speaking about how no one had done it before, so he couldn't look to other theatre companies or other performers to go, how did they do this kind of network performance piece? And there are other, pieces that use virtual reality in theatre, but they definitely found that they'd never been in headsets before they'd done it, so they found it very weird with it. And this is part of the virtual world. These cameras follow you around, and you see yourself within it. And so it was really, really fun performance. I think the audience got a lot from it in terms of it. I didn't really want to be in a headset for a long time after doing it. I was just like, I'm okay for this for a while. And so I went and did a course in Spain in model making for a week to get my hands back into making something. And so the next project is with the Digital Hub in Dublin. We are in an area of Dublin, Dublin 8, the kind of Liberties, that would be a kind of a traditionally kind of like working class area, inner city sort of piece. And they had a project where they had they had a technologist in residence there, and the technologist put in a lot of sensors. And so they had a lot of sensors and a lot of data. I think you described as a lot of spreadsheets of data, and they wanted to do something with it. And so they asked me to interpret it as something that would interface with the community. And originally, I spoke to them about how I didn't really like dashboards, and I found them that they didn't make they were very, at an academic level, and I was like, I just want to make something that's performative and something that uses that data to kind of make a performance for the community. So they might say, here's an air sensor, why is it doing that? And just to understand that technology is there and it's bringing in things, and it's not just a CSV file that they have. And so the visible city, as we call it, was like about using, again, we're going to use a laser scan model of the space and put the different points where the sensors were and feed that real-time sensor data into Unity game engine, and then people would be able to walk around and see what the different sensors were doing in a way that wasn't just ones and zeros. And it's kind of meant to be kind of elastic. A lot of people are meant to be able to interact with it, the local communities, and do it. And it was a while in the making. I was there a lot, and I realized a lot of my ideas at the start were actually impenetrable to the local area. My idea of using like a virtual reality headset is just like, well, no one has one, or they're going to have to come in and use it. And so it really changed as the process went on, and I kind of understand more as I wanted. But this was like something that I really said from the start, is like, machines do not produce art, social systems do. And it was that kind of piece of like me trying to produce something that meant something to the local people. So these were the kind of pieces that I was looking at in terms of like data floating in the air, and how there's a windmill in the middle of the digital hub, or a tower sort of piece, so how we'd represent that. And so I took lots of photos of it, used reality capture, put it into Unity, and created a kind of a world that was like digital scans of what they had within the space. So I spent a lot of time kind of just like mapping these spaces and using, I then switched to making nerfs of it, so different sorts of pieces on it, and eventually kind of having those spaces kind of mapped, and I thought the community would kind of understand this. So, again, capturing that data, doing what we had done in the Shelter in Place project. And yeah, it was like kind of useful, but then I took that data and then was live mapping the sensors feeds into it. So this is controlling the particle cloud there's a beehive area, and so they had a heat sensor within the beehive that they could say what it was, and this is kind of saying how much it was emanating. It was an early kind of sketch of it, and then I moved that on a little bit to creating a courtyard that was a bit more kind of like, this was the air quality sensor mapped in the courtyard, and this was kind of my understanding of what it was going to be. This was like, okay, a sensor emanating, creating something, air quality in the middle of the courtyard. And when I got to this stage, I was like, this doesn't really do what it's meant to do, It's like, it's not actually kind of creating, but this is my original kind of pitch of what I wanted to do. So I had to go, this is what I was going to do. I was like, and the reason that this doesn't work is you end up looking around the thing and not looking at the sensor data. It doesn't really make sense. I was like, we need to make it, no one's going to go into a game engine. We're talking about how they've got active retirement groups. Could we bring them in and do it to the local area? And I realized it was me being wrong. So I was like, no, I'm just going to take this. And a friend, Aisling, who's a producer, said, why are you bothering putting this other stuff around it? They're like actually like having the sensor data emanating, because I showed it to her on a screen like this. She said it was a much stronger piece. So if you had these screens at different locations around, that would show sensor data for, it says what it is up there. That's vehicle frequency, and then the number here. And so it deals with the emanation, and it also creates the sound as well. It's kind of creating the sound live, so that's the actual sensor data controlling it. So you can actually pull a CSV file into Audacity, and it makes sound for you. It's really brilliant. So it's reacting to that, and so this is where it's at now. We're just installing it now. We bought like digital screens, and so they're going to sit in different parts of the digital hub, and hopefully just allow people to know that there's sensor data coming in and go, what's that? That's kind of cool. And then to look at it, so to be aware of the embodied technology that's around them in a way that's accessible to them. So, sorry, just playing the same thing again. And so it's going to be in the lobby in different space like this, so a bad mock-up, but yeah, that's being installed. And then the final project I'm going to speak about is performance and surveillance. So this is my EMAP project. I went to RIXI in Riga last year to create this, and it's a research project that looks to kind of use unsecured CCTV cameras to create kind of performances. So again, using things like facial recognition software and AI tools to do that, and it's not so much to scare people, but to kind of create a kind of fun performance that allows people to then understand the embodied technologies, as was so nicely put. And so it kind of came out of like Gardaí in Ireland, or the police, and they want to use real-time facial recognition, and it's happening lots of places. There's lots of debate about it, but it's what kind of spurred me on to say, well, I'm not sure everyone's aware of how much is around them, you know, how much pieces are. And again, you know, in Iran, how they're using it for implying this hijab law, and it's very easy to do. And when you kind of see how easy it is to use the technology, you go, oh wow, that's just facial match really, really, really quick, you know. And so I got this JSON file that had like loads of unsecured cameras in it, and spent a lot of time looking at unsecured cameras. So I'll be looking at loads of different kind of camera feeds that I find. That's meant to be a GIF, but that GIF something. Anyway, and then I take that into this ML software called Runway, which is kind of fun, and make OSC data and send it to processing to make kind of performance pieces. And so my first pass at it was just like, it was very serious kind of dots of people appearing on screen, and I was just like, it was actually kind of too serious. It was like didn't feel. It felt like performance, but scary performance, not like fun performance. So I kind of took that pass and moved on to the next piece of it. And also, while I was doing this, I kind of looked at the different feeds that were there, and some of them were really good for facial recognition, others were really bad. So I'd be looking at all these feeds of like French laundries are a big thing. Loads of laundries in France have unsecured cameras. I'm not sure if it's a thing that you want to see if someone's nicking your laundry or what the sort of thing is, but I spent a lot of time looking at them. And then other ones were like internal kind of buildings, and they were beautiful pictures, but they didn't really work for facial recognition. And so I made a site of some of my favorite feeds. That's unsecured.cargo.site that you can kind of go and see. So this is one in Ghent. That's a Japanese laundry. That's in Spain. That's a big billboard. Again, that's a French laundry there. So it was kind of like collecting these kind of things and looking at them, and just in my own documentation, because I have to remember what they were. And so I'd have like all these different things. And so I made a book of the camera feeds. So I've got a printed physical book that has the IP addresses, so you can get the book, and if you see a photo you like, you can put in the IP address and visit and see what's happening on it. And it was a way of slowing it down. You know, it's such a rolling kind of vista all the time. By just creating a printed book, it allowed me to kind of, you know, slow it down and kind of spend some time with it. And then, so I went back and changed the feed a bit. The process of what I did, I used the camera feeds and fed those into processing. I used OpenCV to create OSC music sort of piece with it. And that was the kind of final piece. So the facial recognition software follows the person around the frame, and it controls the oscillation of the instrument, essentially. So as you walk across the frame, you're an unwitting performer within this part, and kind of creates strange noises, and different parts and different cameras that I have are very active or inactive. There's a great post office in the UK that I use a lot because a lot of people go there. And so the performance installation part has a plinth, a camera, 2 speakers, and then one of these little pads that you can select the camera, so you can see what the performance is like in different parts of the day. Different places work better. Some places wake up later than others. If you want to see something somewhere in the States, it's much better later in the day, but in the middle of the night there's nothing really there. And so this is kind of just a snippet that I took of what's like. This is one of the French laundries. This is one of my go-tos. And so you can kind of see the OpenCV pops up as a green square, and then you can kind of hear the this is the one in Ghent. So it just starts affecting the performance as those faces come on there. That's in Panama. And sometimes it's really inexact because this is the post office. It starts to see faces where there aren't faces, and it's like not really good technology sometimes, so it's seeing different things as it goes in. I thought they'd turned off this camera the other day, but I think it was just a bank holiday in the UK or something, and it's like, they switched it off. There's so much noise in this space, it just thinks that it's seeing everything with it. This camera I spent a lot of time looking at, and on the day that I recorded this, someone finally came out of the door, so I was like, I've got to leave that in. But strangely, it feels like he knows he's being watched, but I think he's talking to someone through the Ring doorbell or whatever it is. He turns around. And he kind of leaves on a dubstep beat, which I think is kind of appropriate for him. And so that project is still kind of evolving in terms of like putting cameras up in the feeds and the book being printed at the moment, and then working with a collaborator on the music and making kind of more sounds for it and more kind of soundscapes within it to change it. But again, it's a canary in a coal mine of facial recognition, that people kind of go and see the exhibition, switch through the cameras and understand that these things are going on, they can be used for different things, they can understand what's there in a way that's hopefully all of it is like fun and performative and like thing, but also kind of reflecting, being a lens to reflect back at society what's there. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.